Hello, welcome to Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 2 Empirical Approach, and our topic is Problematizing the Object of Study. We need to be prepared to problematize the object of our study. How do we understand the basic goal of our study? How do we conceptualize the society and culture? Unlike the natural sciences, we do not have anything concrete in front of us that we see as society or culture. What we do actually is to infer it from our observations and our assumptions. The process by which we can infer can become quite fuzzy and debatable. For example, one way in which one can refer to society as one's object of study is by its geographical definition. For example, Malinowski studied in 1922 the turbulent Icelanders as a unit of study. Mead studied in 1928 Samoa. Radcliffe Brown carried out his major research in 1922 among the Andaman Islanders, and so on. One would presume that each of these exotic locations also contains a unique culture. The society can also be defined in terms of some other boundary, say of marriage. Thus, a caste or jati can be defined by the boundaries of endogamy. There can be other criteria of membership as well. But not all units have such boundaries. Say, if one wants to study a religion like Hinduism, the field would appear vast and unbounded. Sometimes what one wants to study may not be defined in one location, say a diaspora or an immigrant group that cannot be studied with reference to one location only. Even when one is bound to a location, the social phenomena need not be bounded. Thus, one cannot study a village in rural India without understanding the effects of mass media and national politics on it. Increasingly, the availability of a bounded society is being questioned, and we have techniques such as multi-sited ethnographies and networks to replace the earlier concept of a system. Often the term society is reduced to a subjective rather than objective unit. A society or community is one because the actors or participants define it as such. Thus, the simple way to study Hinduism would be to study those who can themselves Hindu rather than trying to devise an external definition for it. A culture could thus be maximum amount of shared representations about the world that exist across a unit we call a human group. Often such a group, by the very fact of sharing of representations, is defined as a society. Such sharing of representations or culture is not rigid. It transforms and diffuses and transplants itself. While studying a unit of society in India, say among the youth, we cannot overlook the influence of various cultures, including that of USA and Japan, and so on. Here the task would be to separate the imposed from the original, but even such a task may become very complex, as one must take into account the historical development of ideas and interpretations of the world. In a more conventional sense, Anthony Giddens in the Constitution of Society mentions the following two primary senses of the concept of society. The first is the generalized connotation of social association or interaction. The standard definition that is given in the classrooms of a network or pattern of interaction between social actors. And the second is a relatively bounded unit of social relationships forming a system of interdependency that distinguishes it from other such systems. This was the manner in which societies were distinguished in classical times. But today such bounded units are hard to locate and define, and increasingly it being realized that such units may have always been an anthropologist's wishful thinking. What does a social scientist look for while trying to find a unit of study to be defined as a society? In some cases, one may look for boundaries of the linguistic understanding so that it becomes synonymous with the culture, or it may be a self-defined tribe or caste or a geographical unit like a village. However, what problematizes society is its original disassociation from the individual by Durkheim. The social scientist in the field has to be interactive with and observe individuals and not society. If the individual is seen analytically opposed to society, then to make sense of one's finding, a social scientist would ignore the actors altogether and create one's own version of the structure through a process of abstraction. But if society is the product of a process of theorizing, then like all theories, it is contextualized in time and space. What is society then becomes itself a social activity subject to rules of power. Take, for example, the manner in which Indian society was defined in the colonial era by the colonial administrators with the help of social elites of India like the Brahmins and rulers. The version of Indian society and history was that thus constructed prioritized both Brahmins and patriarchy. Paradoxically, the constructions are not mere abstractions, but if created by a source of power, they translate themselves into reality, and thus, as social historians have been able to demonstrate, colonial rule did reconstruct Indian society into the form into which the colonial had imagined it. But in spite of this reconstruction, there was a reality about society that never made it to the official version. Much later, subaltern historians made attempts to salvage this history. In the next discussion, we will have topic conclusion, return to good old empirical approach. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.